Hi folks, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Writer Rebuild, coming to you with episode 32 of the series. Let's get right into it. So this week on Kamen Rider Build, we're seeing the story progress forward with all of these Martian revelations that we got as of last episode, but we're still seeing that things still have to be evened out as to what exactly everybody's going to do with this information. Now it's funny how this information is actually given to other characters here in the show, but that's really not going to be the focus of everything. It's what people do with that information that's really going to carry through what these characters are going to learn. Now at this point in the story, we see that Ryuga is much more the main character here, and Sento's kind of taking a backseat to everything going on and is just kind of reacting to things. But we see that he's having to work with all this new information, especially what Sawa came up with last week, and that Ryuga isn't entirely human. Now, as they reference there in the comedic opening there for the show, they're trying to figure out just exactly how they're going to break this information to Ryuga, since he doesn't already know this. Once he does find out, albeit from Sento just blatantly telling him flat out, hey, you're not human, Ryuga naturally is trying to figure out how he fits into all of this, and it can't possibly be what the obvious thing is. You would almost liken it to getting a bad diagnosis from a doctor, in that he's going through all of the stages of almost grief, where he's trying to rationalize, trying to bargain, trying to get through all of these things to figure out just exactly what's going on, and that his reality isn't just falling apart around him. And as much as Ryuga is trying to rationalize, well, maybe it was this, maybe it was when I was experimented on just a couple of months ago, Sento provides him all of the necessary rationale to prove, no, it's most likely not that, it's what we have right here in front of us, that you were changed from birth and that's affected you throughout the course of your life. And what's interesting about this is that Sento presents all this information to Ryuga, but Sawa also brings up the fact that it was just a little too easy to come up with all of this information, which leads Sento to believe that Stark had a hand in this, which by this point is kind of no duh. He's had a hand in everything revolving around Ryuga. But the thing about this is just why was he doing this? Why did he make this information so easy to come by? The initial response that I had was that it's just for that reason, so that Ryuga could find out about this information and get angry about it. More emotional response, more of a higher hazard level. And also to kind of go back to last week's episode, if it was that easy for her to come by the information, then why was she making such a big deal to Misora about, you don't want to know how I got this information? It's kind of like that one Family Guy joke about Lois asking about the information for Connie D'Amico's house and she just gets it. Now, like I said, the interesting thing is how everybody reacts to this. Sento doesn't think too much of it since, again, he's just kind of viewing in on all of this. It's not directly happening to him, even though we see that his father, i.e. Katsuragi's father, had some dealings with Ryuga early on. Misora, though, brings up this idea of, well, I thought I was the only weird one here, but now it's kind of interesting that we're all kind of weird. Which is kind of no duh as well, because Misora basically has another personality within her, Sento used to be somebody else, and Ryuga is half alien. You all are kind of weird, but the thing that brings you all together is that you all treat each other as your extended family, since none of you really have any family left over. So at this point, you kind of need to push that they need this bond to go ahead and get through all of these trying times here in the series. And speaking of extended family, we see how Sawatari is dealing with his extended family. Now, of course, since he's lost the crows several episodes back, we see that Utsumi is plotting to get back Pandora's box by way of extortion. He's kidnapped and is holding hostage the people that work on Sawatari's farm and says, you need to bring us Pandora's box or we're going to off all of them. Now the interesting thing is exactly how they deal with it. Sawatari knows too much at this point. If this was him several episodes ago, of course he'd have gone charging in there. But at this point he's learned, he's matured, and he's grown a lot as a character, so he knows he just can't put his own needs in front of everybody else in the country, so he has to deny that request. And we see that it's eating away at him. He doesn't go talk to anybody, he's still dealing with it by himself, which is much in keeping with his character. Now what's further interesting about that is that the people on the farm absolutely understand that decision. That's why they respect him so much. That's why they wanted to work for him in the first place. You gotta hand it to him. Those are really dedicated farm workers who are willing to give up their lives for their boss's belief. So with Utsumi's plan falling apart all around him, the person he was trying to extort doesn't want to take part in it, the people that he's taken hostage don't care if they're taken hostage, now he has to go ahead and make good on his threat, which is to kill everybody. But that ends up having to go against him as well. Rogue doesn't want anything to do with this because this isn't what he signed up for. Now even though we see that Gentoku does still have to work with Nanba and Bloodstark later on at the end of the episode, it's interesting seeing this kind of reluctant turn for him to become a hero. He doesn't want to do these things, he wants to work for his own ideals, as he's been saying throughout the entire series, but he sees that he's reluctantly having to side with the heroes more and more once he sees just what he's gotten himself into with Nanba and Bloodstark. Now I do have to hand it to Nanba and Bloodstark that they did have a plan within a plan here. The whole idea for Grease giving in to Pandora's box would have worked in their favor if he had brought it to them, but since he didn't, it seems seems that they had a backup plan. Since he's upset that they even did this in the first place, he would naturally go running out into the field anyway, like they were counting on, to go ahead and fight. This leads into a whole side fight with Grease and Build versus the Hell Brothers, which actually doesn't mean anything. It's a distraction, and it's interesting that they're presenting it as such. This fight is just fluff. It's not here for anything more than entertainment. We're distracting you from what's going on over here. Now, while this fight is going on elsewhere, we see that Bloodstark and Rogue are going to take on Pandora's box directly and try to get it back. But the interesting thing about it is the only writer left is Ryuga. He's the only person that can answer the call. But before he can go ahead and do this, he's actually kind of doing some soul searching right now to see just who he is and how he's going to handle everything. And again, going with those different stages and trying to figure out who he is, we actually see him go to talk to Kasumi. Of course, Kasumi isn't around anymore. She died way back at the beginning of the series, so he's there at her grave talking to her, trying to get some idea of who he is. And we think he's kind of already got the answer. He's working through this logically, and that's very much a growth for his character, not so much being a hothead, even though being hot right now is actually his power. We see that he's actually trying to think of things rationally. He's not trying to be the same person he's been this entire time. Now, once he does answer the distress call and goes out to fight Bloodstark, Bloodstark knows exactly what buttons to push, as he's done the entire time. He's got a handle on this whole situation, and further pushes into him, oh, you're not human, you're meant to fight. We know you're supposed to be like this, you can't help who you are. And that goes into this whole thing of nature versus nurture, which was brought up several episodes ago in a conversation between Sento and Isurugi. Now, the thing of it is, when Sento does show up, he's still trying to play that same part he's been doing, the sacrificial hero, don't you worry your little head, I'll handle this. But at this point, Ryuga's had enough. Now, I get it, from Sento's point of view, he's trying to compensate for Ryuga's mental state, since he realizes, yeah, I was kind of a jerk in the way that I presented this life-changing information to him. But at the same time, the focus, again, isn't on Sento, it's on Ryuga. And Ryuga goes ahead and puts all this together and puts it in a form that can actually help. He states to Bloodstark what I think is probably the most clear definition of what a common writer is that I've seen in a long time. He tells him, look, you and I might have the same power. That power may be used for destruction, but I'm not going to use it for that. I'm going to use it to fight against you and fight for love and peace and all of these other ideals. That's the kind of common writer I want to be. That, more than anything, really cements him in my mind as a great common writer. Much the same as Build came to that conclusion on his own, and Sawatari came to that decision on his own, they all came to that. Nobody had to tell them how to be common writers, they just know how to be common writers, and that is great for the storytelling. And after a very short fight, after turning into cross magma, we see that Bloodstark again retreats, but he's making these notions of an ultimate driver being the thing he's really after right now, not so much Pandora's box, but we know that that's still going to be needing a bargaining tool, which is why Rogue, in all the confusion, kidnaps the Prime Minister, his father. Now that Namba has a hostage, this will lead into next week's episode where we see that Sento in some way or form will have to hand over this ultimate driver, and we'll see the debut of a new writer, Common Writer Evol. So yes, for this week's episode, it was a lot less heavy than last week's. I do appreciate the story being moved forward, and I very much appreciate the message being gotten across to this new generation, just exactly what common writers are meant to be. I appreciate that depiction, and I'm glad that that's being given out to a younger generation. As far as the storytelling goes, it was a lot more straightforward this week, with not so much of an emphasis on comedy, unless you consider Sawa going out for her computer falling at the beginning of the episode, but other than that, it's just straight up storytelling, which I kind of prefer. You do need levity here and there, but thankfully the episode wasn't so heavy that we didn't need that much comedy to balance it out. But there's a couple of questions I have, in that there was a lot more that could have been done by the Toto government once Sento did hand over Pandora's box back at the beginning of the episode, things that probably could have ended things a lot quicker. And I get it, we're trying to extend this thing out because it has to hit about 45 or 50 episodes, but it's really nagging on my mind when we see that there's some really simple decisions that could have been made that would have made things a lot easier, but they avoid it because we have to see this thing out to the full end. But those, of course, are my thoughts on the episode. I want to hear what you guys thought in the comments below, so let's go ahead and talk about a few things. First off, Bloodstark and his relation to Ryuga. Do you think that during those experiments when he was younger, Bloodstark actually implemented that idea of needing to fight in Ryuga, or is that just a part of his personality naturally? Secondly, the main character. Do you think that by this point in the series that Ryuga is the main character, or it's still Sento? And thirdly, in reference to Pandora's box, since they figured out that Ryuga could manipulate the box, why didn't they just get him to try and lower the tower and the wall right then and there? You tell me in the comments below. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 32 of Writer Rebuild. For episode 32 of Kamen Rider Build, the pre-programmed tragedy, I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next episode.